Welcome to Today in EVE Online. This is Matt Earl, and today is Friday, December 6th, 2019. I'm joined by a few friends today. Caleb.
Hey guys.
Orion.
Hello.
And Arya.
Hello.
So those are their voices, and we'll get to talking about some fights, because it looks like there's been a lot of fighting. We also want to go back and review, and I'll try to get on screen, the new wallet that is in EVE Portal 2 that actually was implemented last night or less than 12 hours ago. And so it's now part of your phone app if you have it. That is EVE Portal 2. And you can get that on your wherever your app store is. All right, let's start out with let's go with the North, actually. The North fight. It looks like Dead Coalition and NCPL Horde. We should probably reverse the order of those these days, because Horde's bringing most of the people. 220 ships to Northern Coalition's 100 and Pandemic Legion's 50. I mean, Pandemic Horde is putting more than twice as many fighters into a battle than NCPL. So at some point, you got to give Horde their due, right? Of course, the fighters aren't equivalent, because NCPL have older fighters that have a lot more assets, and they can bring a heavier amount of damage and hit points to a fight than Horde can, but Horde's putting those people there.
I think that playing field's even quite quickly, especially with the advent of the boosters and whatnot and injectors. It's a lot more even than we think, and Horde actually had far more people than that. They had a full fleet and an overflow fleet.
Oh, really? So this battle report is just one battle report that happened in GO6 TAC 8Y last night. But this looks like it was a big fight last night. It came up to 40 billion lost. I think they were fighting over, well, I don't see what they were fighting over. I have to go look at the article. But what do you know about what's going up north? You're in Pandemic Legion, right, Orion?
I am.
Yeah, so what's going on there?
So we in PL have dropped some structures in 5 TAC P, which is the Guardians of the Galaxy in its staging right now. And so we've been poking around, kind of doing similar things that tests were doing to FRT when they dropped that Astro Hut right there in front of their keeps. Ours isn't on grid, but we are still doing kind of similar things that they were doing.
That's funny. Did you call it an Astro Hut?
Yeah, sorry.
I like that. That's pretty funny.
I'm pretty terrible about that. My military terms, I remember getting talked to by Major because when I was talking about helicopters for a briefing, I called them shit hooks instead of Chinooks.
It's a porta potty.
Flying school buses and whatnot. But yeah, actually, the G06 fight or G06 fight was was after an initial fight we had because we were anchoring more structures in GOTG staging, and we had another timer ahead of time in there. I think we lost that fight, but we still had another fight before that, and then immediately flew back and got ready for this one.
Yeah, what's the tide of fighting going on? Maybe you can give us like an overview of what's happened in the last month and how it's intensified and where you think it's going to go.
I can only speak for Penny Lee's side of it and what I see personally. I'm not in a lot of the higher echelons of planning for this thing, but really we've just been having a lot of fun inside their staging, poking at things, trying to warp people off the keep star, RFing things within our staging area, and just trying to keep some pressure on them. Really, it's just they don't really do a whole lot until we start poking things or a timer comes up.
Mm-hmm. So they only fight when they need to protect a structure.
It seems that way. I mean, every once in a while, Ranger Regiment will do some things and defend themselves when it gets closer. Late U.S. time zone, their guys are starting to wake up. You'll start seeing them poke around and repel us off gates and stuff like that.
Yeah. Now, it's really interesting. There's a big divide between time zones here. You have NCPL and Horde. They probably have a stronger EU and US time zone. But Dead Coalition has always had a stronger Australian time zone. And they also now have a Ranger Regiment, which is mostly Chinese players, same time zone as Australia, basically. And then you also have Mongolian players, which is really interesting. And those guys, what are those guys called? What's their name? I should know their name, but I forgot. Anyways, those guys are what make up Dead Coalition. And so do you have like momentum swings that keep going back and forth between Australian time zone and US EU time zone?
I'm a U.S. time zone player, so I only see what I see throughout my times playing.
Right.
So you can tell later and later at night their activity picks up a little bit, and you have to be more careful about the fights you choose. Like we got baited out by some Lokis. One Loki crashed a gate, we started attacking, and then they brought 7 or 8 extra Lokis in a fleet together and pushed us off that gate. So you see them doing more and more stuff recently, like they just anchored structures in our staging for PL staging to kind of respond to what we were doing, but they don't have any activity there past defending them when we RF them.
Well, here it is right in front of me. Siberian squads is what I meant. So when I said Mongolian, I was wrong. It's Siberian players. Those are basically Russian players, but way far east Russian players that are almost in a Chinese time zone. So that's Siberian squad. And there are only 20 in this fight. This fight happened, I think this is 2 o'clock in the morning UTC, it looks like. Because I think these are all UTC times, but we'll see. In any case, yeah, so Siberian squads, Ranger Regiment, and you have... Those are the 2 groups that really make up the fighting power of Dead Coalition, which is not much these days. So this fight here that we're looking at was kind of big because Goon Swarm and the Initiative came, basically the Imperium. And those groups are Goon Swarm Federation, the Initiative, Initiative Mercenaries. That's basically Initiative, but those are the guys they don't want to put on their kill boards yet. They're kind of like the training groups. And then you have the Bastion, TNT. Oh yeah, you're TNT, right?
I am.
How's TNT going?
It's going pretty good.
Are you up here in the north?
Yeah, we've had groups up in the north for I think the last year. Just small deployments, trying to stay under the radar, have some good fights.
Yeah, all right. And so those are the defenders pretty much. You have the Imperium leaning in to help out Dead Coalition. For those that don't understand the dynamic of what's going on with nullsec in the north, it's very interesting, and I think it goes back about 1 year to 2 years, right? You had Dead Coalition, which used to be known as Guardians of the Galaxies. I always considered that the worst name in EVE Online, so I'm glad they changed it. I'll call them Dead Coalition, sounds much better. So Dead Coalition was in the north as an ally to the Northern Powers, which you're seeing here, Pandemic Horde, Northern Coalition, Pandemic Legion. And Solaris, Tonium, we'll call them Solaris. Those guys were actually a corporation that were in Dead Coalition for a long time. They were part of the major, they were a big alliance inside that, big corporation inside that alliance, but they broke out of there. I think there was some bad blood and became their own alliance, it looks like. So those guys were all allied. And what happened was that Sort Dragon, who is the leader of Dead Coalition in self-preservation mode, or maybe just really good diplomatic decisions, decided to take some of the heat off of him that was coming from the Imperium, coming up from the south through Fountain region and Pure Blind and Fade. That's the path up. And in doing so, he angered his allies because he basically said, we want to create a ceasefire for a few months, and I will pay that bill. Sword Dragon did. So he paid a bill for a ceasefire, and that's pretty much when Horde said, we want nothing to do with you, Dead Coalition. And Northern Coalition was like, just threw their hands up. Even though they were aware of the deal, they didn't say no. They didn't say yes either. Pandemic Legion at that point wasn't really talking much to the public. And so it was met with a lot of indifference. It wasn't a thank you sort for saving us, because I don't think they, I think they wanted the Imperium to get exhausted by traveling through the north and trying to take it when it was difficult. Because what that actually did allow was the Imperium to go back home with a victory, with something they could sell to their people, and with a bunch of trophies, a bunch of faction fortizars. And in doing so, was able to sit down and farm and get fatter and fatter, bigger and bigger. And they came back, I think, about less than a year later, with twice their number. And at that point, there was no resisting. So again, Dead Coalition said, we don't want to take you on. You can just spare us, if please. And Imperium and Imperium and Initiative decided to do that and basically bypass them. He let them use his territory to stage from, and they took out all of Tribute and Vale, or most of Vale, I think. And basically, the North put up a little bit of resistance, but there was no stopping essentially 1,000 super capitals. That's just way too much firepower to take on. And so they retreated and abandoned all the territory. But when that was over, and the Imperium decided to go back down south and get fat again or do whatever they wanted to do, they had kind of glassed the north, as they called it. At that point, the areas that were abandoned were kind of like fertile, empty territory. So all these little groups started popping up, like Rote was one of the major groups, and the Unspoken, and all these little smaller organizations started kind of popping up all over the place and taking it on, and that's been really interesting to watch. And one of those groups was actually an FC from Goonswarm named Kendar. He ran one of their special interest groups, one of their SIGs, and so he started his own group called Trigger Happy. We'll talk about them in a minute. So you have all these little groups kind of popping up, and you have NCPL and Horde kind of backed up into drone regions, setting up their own situation to make money. And they're mad at Sword Dragon, right? They can't take on Test through working, they can't go south to take on Test. Winter Coalition's losing the war at this point and will lose the war. So they decide they're going to go north instead and give some payback to Dead Coalition, particularly Sword Dragon, and menace him and try to take as much from him as they can. That is the battle that's happening in the north. So it's Horde, Northern Coalition, Pandemic Legion, Solaris. I think they're called, what's their name? Slice.
That's who you're thinking of.
Yeah,
they
Slice.
live in Ethereum Reach now.
Yeah, they're part of they're near Horde. And Triumvirate's in there, which is kind of cool. They're tiny, but Triumvirate is this group that has a lot of really good fighters. They just keep coming back. They've been back at least 7 times. So they disappear and they come back, depending on their leader's status, because I think he's military and leaves every once in a while to do real life military stuff. So when he comes back and has some time, they kind of gather back around him. That's true for Triumvirate. That's true for Elo Knight's effect on Black Legion, and that's true for a couple other places too. You were in Triumvirate, weren't you, Orion?
I was, and I think that's true of all of EVE. I think there's at least 1 to 3 people within a coalition, alliance, or even corp that if they were to go, the whole thing would kind of crumble around itself, and people would kind of go find other places to. I mean, that's just the way it is. That's something funny about the whole North thing. We were talking about goons showing up. I remember talking to Brisk about this, and he's like, "No, they have no reason to come up there." And here we go with a 1,200 man fight, basically, with over 300 goons showing up.
Let's look at that fight. I think you posted it. This is.
Well, this is the 5-pack P one that I did. This is that first timer we went to.
So this is the 6th. No, this is recently.
Yeah, this was the precursor to the G06 fight.
I see. Okay. So what happened here?
This was over, I believe, structure timer for us in the system, and in it, and Ranger Regiment and Darkness and whatnot formed up, and we we went after them, and we just didn't do as well as we thought we would.
Yeah. This is a looks like a Loki fleet. Wow, with a lot of logistics. Logistics got eaten up, and you lost your Lokis. It looks like.
Yeah, we couldn't volley them quick enough. It's a bad situation, and they've won that fight fair and square.
What's up, Ron?
Hey, so I I think so. Technically, you're right, but I think the one thing you're missing is that PanFam has just done an excellent job at Citadel spamming, which is what this is. The importance of the 5 TAC P fight is that's on their keep star, right? Like that's where they're staged out of, and that's like what we did with the little Astra that could. So, they lost a couple of Lokis, but like this is such a big play that, not getting absolutely demolished, sitting on their keep star, you're doing good. I think it was just a really fun and great play by PanFam all around, because that other big fight from last night, that was over another structure. They're putting down these structures. They're using them, to be able to jump out of and whatnot. And just a nice, like a strong move, both sides forming up big numbers, big ships. Like, it was just great. I was so excited watching that fight last night, both of them, to see, I mean, first off, I hate those damn memes. I hate that, like the NC dock crap, because no one loves that more than NC. They want you to think they're not going to undock,
Well, the reason why the Citadel spam is the thing that I think we're focusing on, it's just because of the time zone locking. You can't entosis any of their stuff because it's so far out of your ranges. You have zero hope of doing anything about it. All their ADMs are above 2 miles per hour, so that really puts them way out of reach.
Like, you're singing my song, brother. We wrote this song for months and months. Hell yeah, you got a Citadel spam. You got to do something, man.
Well, isn't that coming to an end, Citadel spam? And first of all, describe what it is and why it might be coming to an end.
Yeah, it's coming to an end for the most part, and so
well, first describe what it is, and that way we know what's coming to.
Yeah. So, citadels are, structures, and the cheap structures that you can house larger ships in, capitals, right? So you can put dreads and things like that in the Fortizars. So these structures, the smaller ones, are really cheap. When you can get, from 400 to 500 million for, a single structure. And what you can do is when you anchor this, when you immediately anchor it, you have 15 minutes that you have to watch, and that it's very, very vulnerable during this 15 minutes. Now, that is usually a simple timer to watch because you can put them anywhere in the system. Well, then what happens then is it starts a 7-day timer. And at the end of that 7 days, you have another 15 minutes. And then after that 15 minutes, it's fully anchored, right? And Citadel spamming is basically covering an area, maybe 3 to 4, sometimes in a system, and having them all at the same time. So the defender from the Citadel spam has to choose which ones they want and which ones they don't, because they won't be able to take all of them, right? Because you can cut them off wherever they go and just fight them, and so some of them will get anchored. And what that provides is a great way station in enemy space. So you can jump to it, you can dock to it, you can asset safety from it. You can, most importantly, set clone bays in random spots, throughout the enemy space, and that allows you to reship. So with this update, so this has been, and we've all used it. Every group has used it. We've used it. All the groups have used it because it is a viable tactic, right? But we all hate it because it's extremely difficult to defend against. And there are groups that have absolutely zero hope or want to defend structures, but what they do is they just keep spamming them. They just keep dropping more and more and more, and they're so difficult to remove that this kicking over castles update is really interesting because even though we've been complaining about it, they've never really kind of touched it. One of the major problems with timers currently is, as a structure owner, you set two things. You set the time on the clock that you want it to come out, say 5 p.m. And the idea is that you're going to set that for your prime time. And then the second is the day of the week. Well, this has been used not really for your prime time or for a good day, but whatever's the worst day for your enemy, right? So it's kind of been used defensively more than offensively, which is a problem in the grander scheme of things, because we want, to have the option to be able to kill these things without putting so much effort that it's just not worth it. So the kicking over castles removes the date. So instead of being able to pick a day of the week, the day will be caused by the timers. So what this really enables, and Imperium is very well known for having their timers on Tuesday. I think it was like 5 a.m. or something, like some insane time.
5 a.m.
So if you
where?
wanted, so it was Tuesday at 5 a.m. like U.S. standard. So it was like if you lived in the U.S. and you wanted to kill a bunch of their structures, like you'd have to take the day off work. So this first update removes that ability, and it really empowers the attackers, because now you can have a weekend timer, right? So now you can have big fights. You can start on a Tuesday and you can time it and it'll come out on Saturday. So it's a great step in the right direction.
Well, not to get too deep into it, but there's been some controversy about it because you would have to prepare for a weekend battle on the weekday, which makes it a moot point, because at some point your alliance is going to have to wake up in the middle of the week and alarm clock in order to either set the final timer on the weekend or to finish off a final timer during the week because you reinforced it during the weekend. But we'll talk about that a bit later. I want to go back to the actual battles. So they've been spamming a lot of these structures in the north. Is that what you were saying, the NCPL Horde people?
Yeah, they have. And a lot of them have successfully anchored. And this is creating those great, fights. And the one, I think Orion was, kind of not didn't want to gloat, but they did great. They did an excellent job, and this is on the enemy staging Keepstar. I think it's wonderful.
So they're surrounding it with siege machines, basically. Surrounding the keep with siege machines. I like it.
Well,
and remember, that's
we
free
don't have
intel.
a structure on their keep right now.
Hmm.
Ours is off grid.
Yeah, it's off grid, but I mean, it's also free intel, right? You just, it's so easy just to log in, and you're right there. It's lovely. They're very powerful in enemy stations, especially enemy staging. Someone can just easily log in, how many's in local, without having to worry about cloaking or any of that kind of stuff.
Well, sometimes local has been a little buggy lately.
Right. So going back to the themes, what you're seeing is NCPL exacting some revenge on Dead Coalition, which is, I'll point to it if you can see it, darkness in the blue here. We're looking at the PIRAT.space map. You can find that on talkinginstations.com. There are maps there that show sovereignty and people who have influence. And the thing is, by the way, these maps are old, and they show influence in a way that was some kind of mathematical equation on where the populations were, I think based on sovereignty, and then it kind of glows out, fades away past a certain point, which was kind of a neat effect. But since Sov changed, these things mean a lot less than they used to, because it's all based on TCUs, which are territorial claim units, which means that you have your flag planted in that system, so it seems like you dominate that system, but that really doesn't do anything except save you some fuel costs. What really counts are structures and the I-hubs that protect the defensive multipliers of the system. Those are the two really important things to show how strong that system is, which PIRAT cannot reflect. It has a different formula, it has an old formula. So take this with a good indication of where people are, but not a very, very exact, it's not a science anymore, because again, the system by which influence is rated has changed away from what this map represents. That said, you can look at it, see the colors. So you have Siberian squads, you have Ranger Regiment in a couple areas there, and then you have Darkness, which is Sword Dragon's Alliance, which I think is the smallest of the three these days. And if you look down to the right, you will see, and I'll actually scoot you down a little bit, this area here, which is Tribute and Vale of the Silent, are now areas that are populated by a lot of little groups. One of them in dark blue here is Northern Coalition. That's just some territory they're using probably to stage from. And in the middle between there, you see this black dot is Venal. Venal is a region all of its own that cannot be conquered. Therefore, it will never have a color on this map. But it is a great place to stage attacks in the north from, because you'll always be able to basically park in a station. So you can stage your attack from Venal. And that's one of the traditional homes of Elo Knight and his band of his
mercenaries.
Yeah, band of mercenaries. They usually live in Venal and just wreak havoc on the north, since they're very, very powerful. We'll call them Pancho Villa. Okay, so again, this is a fight that's happening up north, not necessarily for territory, but to exact some punishment on Dead Coalition, to destabilize it, hopefully break it apart, reduce their influence, to make them pay a price because they didn't stand up to the Imperium when the Imperium came marching through. That's what this war is about.
So I came in late, so I don't know if you heard like the kind of the 1-2 punch of both fights last night. The 5-tech P fight, Initiative, and the Lawn was there, Bastion was there. They did pretty well against them, but again, they can reship instantly. This is very far away, but they still did a good fight.
We're talking about 5-tech P and Branch, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
In the very top left of the map.
Yeah.
So then, you fast forward, I think it's like 45 minutes, if it was an hour, and then you have that second fight, right? And in that fight, how that started was Initiative and them were, shooting a structure. And 2 jumps away, PanFam was there in full force, full battle dress. The horses had armor, everything. They were all there. And it was a massive, and I was going by and I'm like, oh yeah, this is the NC and the PL that I know, right?
The hammer.
Like everyone memes, but these are the guys that I know, and you got to watch out, right? So they're like, as I'm driving through, or as I'm flying through, they're all, I'm saying hi to everyone. And, one of them was like, we don't know. They're not going to drop. We're not going to drop. So we just sit here and we wait. Well, so Initiative and them, they did, reinforce that structure, and they were going home, right? And, PanFam wasn't having anything about it. So Initiative, they were all going home. The job done, right? They were going home. So PanFam wasn't having anything about it, right? So they all got dressed up. They put the armor on their horses, and they were ready to party. So they sinoed in front of Initiative them, and as they were heading home, they got 2 jumps in front of them, had 2 sinos there on the gate at 0, brought in, their fleets, and it was just absolutely fantastic because the numbers were about even, right? I mean, the numbers were even, and PanFam brought in a couple of capitals, but I loved, I feel like it was a tasteful use.
They didn't overpower them.
Exactly. They used it to augment their force, right? Which is a perfect, excellent use of capitals and faxes. And, the goons and initiative and everyone, they didn't freak out, right? They just started pulling back, get them away from those capitals. And then eventually PanFam said, you know what? The risk that we have of these just normal capitals on grid isn't worth the value that they're delivering, so they just jumped them out. No big deal. And the fight continued. But, I was kind of talking about this last night, one of the kind of fun things with like nullsec FCs, is it's like a bunch of men that live in a big court, right? And what we always like to do is have a new car, right, and show it off. And that new car is like a doctrine. And I know that Pando has been working on a couple of new doctrines, right? And I hear
he
rumors.
Has to. His old doctrine's
the boosters, right? He has to. And I kind of been teasing him about him, but I didn't ask him because it's kind of like a fun surprise, right? Like, I mean, I want to see what he comes up with. I think it'll be neat. And last night, we got to see 2 new doctrines from Pando. We got to see his Lokis. Not super crazy, like as in,
I don't think it's new doctrines. The Ishtar's a standard armor Ishtar with the before, and same with the Lokis. Lokis are just either AB or MWD Lokis.
But has he got some kind of Pando twist to it?
Not that I've seen.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so it's not like in the grander scheme of things. Yeah, they're probably just recycled from here, from there. But if you think of it like legacy, right, or test, we have basically like 5 or 6 doctrines, and coming up with a new doctrine, not just the theory crafting, but also everyone having to buy the damn things, all the training, all that sort of, and everyone getting used to them. I mean, when's the last time like either of you guys saw Ishtars on field in a major fleet engagement? I mean, no kidding. Like for me, it's been like 2013, like 2014.
You're not asking me the last time I flew in a nullsec fleet, right? Because that would really
no.
embarrassing for me. So
no.
I think, but I'll tell you, the last engagement I can remember, I may have flown a few times since then, was X-47, where my Erebus was getting shot by the Imperium. I was broadcasting for INN at the time, so I was like, hey, I'm working here. I'm working for you guys, and you're targeting me. But it's all good. I survived. I think I disconnected like 9 times in that fight, so I was like, I think I'll put this away for a while. Anyway.
Yeah, no, but I mean, Orion, you're right on. I mean, this isn't, groundbreaking stuff as much as it's always fun to see, other FCs kind of experiment with new things, right? So it's kind of fun, right? Like if you see, me show up with, Lokis or something, that's neat or interesting because, I don't run T3s, right? So that's just something like a nuance, right? It's not, a new formula for Coke or something.
Let me point something out here. See, the north and the east are actually connected quite well. There's the map in its whole. It may be hard to see on screen, but you can see there's these really long strings or lines here that go from the east, the far, far east, up to the north into Tenal. And so what that line represents is one jump, because those 2 gates are connected. So you can jump from one region to another, and you can see that there's a few. Let me actually look at this. Where is it? Let's go to the dotland maps, which are very useful for this sort of conceptualizing where the map is. And you can see that Cobalt Edge leads right into Tenal, as does Paragon Falls. Paragon Falls leads right into Venal. So these 2 northern areas, Tenal and Venal, I know, they're like twins, right? those can be reached from the far east. So if we go into Tino, you'll see right in the middle here is, well, actually, the relationship that I'm talking about is this HB TAC gate from Cobalt Edge leads right into NC's staging area, which is SF TAC. So they're one jump into Tino, and as you can see, all the territory for RR on this map belongs to Ranger Regiment. So this is all Dead Coalition space, and you have NC Dot right inside the front door to this system, and they were able to attack the middle of the map here in G06 TAC 8Y. And that's what we're talking about here. And this is in the middle of a region, and normally that's where an alliance will stage themselves. Why? Because when they're in the middle of a region, they can have a jump range that isn't measured in light years, and it's basically a big circle to most of the region. If they were down at the bottom left of a region, they would only be able to reach maybe half the map. But when you station yourself in the middle of the map for that region, you can reach almost all of it if you're in the middle of it, depending on the region, of course, and the geography.
You know, I had a, you know, I rarely get Orion without the kind of the memes or the Reddit or whatever. But so I'd love to. I'm wondering because Orion, you know, is one of those kind of cutting edge guys. You know, he's flying, you know, really nice doctrines. He's out in the front. You know, he's like doing forward staging. He's out, you know, kind of brawling, you know, in small gangs. And I was wondering, Orion, how do you feel the fight has been going, or your guys' involvement up to like now? And are you excited for the next month or two?
I picked myself up out of my chair when you said I'm cutting edge.
That's code for a cutting edge lord.
Well, oh yeah, well, cutting edge skill wise, right? Like you're a top end, top tier kind of pilot.
My experience with Orion is he just tells it like it is, but
or how I feel it is. I won't.
Yeah, even that. Look at he qualifies.
Yeah,
being upfront about it. If I'm with a group, that group's the best group to me, and then that's just how I am. But I also try to keep it as real as I can. Like if we did shit, we did shit. I mean, that's just the way it is. But really, it just depends on what we can do from here. If we can keep structure online in here and we can keep poking about, I think it's gonna be great fun. I've had great fun hanging out in their staging, doing the little things, small ganging around. I think that's right now what a lot of the PL guys, especially in US Times, would really like doing is like poking around and doing that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like, you know, PL is kind of stayed true to their, you know, we're going to be disruptive announcement that they were talking about right before Vegas?
Doing what we can, yeah. I mean, again, the time zone locking stuff is a mitigating factor to it all, but I think we are. It's just a matter of finding the targets to do it to, and I think this one's a good one to try at least.
Yeah, I was cruising around, and I saw, you know, some PL kind of small gangs roaming, and I'm like, you know, thank God this isn't Deterrent. Like, they found a new home to come up and harass, man, because we're good. We're settling down with our slippers on. It's Christmas time. We're chilling.
So that's where you live, Deterrent, in the south.
Yeah, when we were fighting in Deterrent, you know, Orion was a guy I saw, you know, all the time down there, you know, down in T3s, and they were hitting Faith Abalis a lot, right, in Tosis Wars and that kind of thing.
T3s are really strong cruisers.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, I'm just breaking
cruisers
it down.
are just so strong.
Yeah. All right.
Great.
Let me ask you guys the question. I'm not sure I can answer because it's kind of a vague question, or it's not a vague question. It's a good question, but it's a vague answer. Nolith asks, are there nukes in this game?
I would think your Super Capital or Titan, like if you bring a full-on group of that into any fight that doesn't have an equal response, would be the equivalent to dropping a nuke on something.
Yeah.
If you want to parallel anything.
I think what he's asking is there a way to drop a giant bomb and kaboom on a group? And that would be, if you're asking in the figurative way of what nukes are, then yes, and that would probably be in the guise of these ships called Titans, and motherships are actually supercarriers that can deliver a ton of damage if they're all grouped up and whatever. Doomsday weaponry belongs on Titans, for instance. And that's kind of a nuke. But if you're actually talking about nukes in a very specific way, all the technology for a certain race in the game, the race is called Minmatar, they use nuclear technology. That's how their weaponry works. Okay, we've spent a lot of time on this in the north. We'll cover more of this, of course, on Talking in Stations proper on Sunday and Wednesdays. So catch those shows. Ron here is host of the Wednesday show. And let's move on to something that happened just below when Rote Capel took on Pittsburgh and destroyed his very, very expensive supercarrier, a Vendetta. It's a faction carrier. Let's bring up that kill board now. Anyone got any info on this one?
There was a Reddit post lining out that the Rote and them were forming for another timer. And if this is true, and this is Pittsburgh's alt, was RFing another structure while that was going on, and then they just rage formed to deal with that.
Yep, that's what I heard. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He wanted to shoot that Athenor.
With a Vendetta? I guess he's... he has a lot of expensive ships, I think. He's pretty well.
Yeah, you can say why it seems silly, but I mean, it's in a day and age in EVE where we're complaining about there's zero content, that there it is.
Yeah, maybe that's he's drawing them in. But that is, I think also it does a lot of damage, right? So you can get through stuff faster if you use it.
It does a lot of damage, but it's also a great big target. Like,
it could have been just he just didn't have a lot of folks to do it, and he just felt like he could do it by himself. I mean, I've seen how many times have we run into where people use supers for something you just don't think would be really something you should do, and they do it on their own anyway.
Yeah. To give you an idea, this is the same. It looks the same as a supercarrier called the Nyx from the Galente Empire. And the Nyx itself right now, they used to be worth about 25 billion ISK. So it would take you some time, months, to earn that kind of money to buy that kind of a ship. And when you used it, it's very slow and vulnerable to subcap fleets if you're by yourself. But when you group a lot of these things up, they're devastating and they can deliver a ton of damage. And these were used often to take down structures because they could just rip through structures so quickly. They're normally worth 25 billion, and then now with the industry and in overdrive that it is, they're really selling for about 12 to 14 billion. This is a faction version of that kind of a ship, which means that it's very rare, and so its price here is listed at 126. Sorry, that's with the fitting. So let me actually.
Yeah, it's about 90 billion for the hull.
Yeah, that's.
I almost bought one. Yeah, about 90 bill.
Yeah, it's valued at 120 billion on this, but it's clearly it's being built for less. And I think the actual build cost is about, I want to say 85 to 90 billion. So, and there's no way around that build cost, unless minerals really, really crash, which they have, and that's why it went down to 80, 90, but you can't really get any lower than that. So these things are always worth, and it's very specific to, this is Serpentis faction, right? These are pirates called Serpentis, and they built this type of ship. And those ships require a ton of minerals, so there's no way to really lower their cost, except when the market slumps. And right now it's as slumped as it's gonna get, probably. And so these ships are as cheap as they're ever going to be because they just take so much actual minerals. So when the mineral prices start going up, look for Vendetta ships to actually start going up. And that's a bit different than other faction ships, which blueprints are the choke point there. The rarity of the blueprint is what makes it valuable. So if over time more and more blueprints are released, the price of those faction ships will go down and down and down because there'll be more of them in the game, more of them to sell. But Vendetta is very specific in that way that it requires a massive amount of minerals to build.
Well, yeah, it's about half of it, about 40 to 45 bill is in that just a massive amount of minerals. And, because I was looking into this, right? I was like, well, this could be the baby step to a faction titan, right? And, about half, 40, 45 bill is in minerals. And then the other half, are in these these faction parts, right? That drop. And those are just, there's so many, there's 40 to 45 billion in just those. So you would have to just keep buy orders up for a month or two just to be able to buy this thing. And it's worth, 7 or 8 normal supers. And it's a big target on its back. And, it also has an amazing skin. It has that Serpentis Victory skin, which, obviously, why wouldn't you get it if it has that skin?
Right. Yeah. And Aber here says 40 billion of 150 billion ship is minerals, and that's normally the case with factions, but not with Serpentis. And this is why this is where I invested money. And I have a vendetta, but it's just sitting there waiting for, and it may never happen, but it's just sitting there waiting for mineral prices to go up, or for the Hypernet relay. Maybe we'll get rid of it there. I'm kind of excited about that. But the reason I bought it was because I knew it wouldn't ever drop to like what Titans used to be 100, 120 billion. Then they dropped to about 80 billion, and then they really dropped to about 40 billion. A terrible, terrible place to save money is owning Titans.
As a complete aside, and I don't want to derail, but did you hear what ProGod, his first auction in his summer club is going to be?
Nope.
The very first thing he's going to auction is a Raven state issue.
Those very rare ships. Yeah.
So there's only 4 in the game, and this is going to be one of them. And the price is like $7 billion a ticket, 500 tickets. So it's going to be like 3.5 trillion or something total or whatever.
Yeah. Rayus here says that this is the cheapest faction Supercarrier who's ever seen fit. And I was just looking at it thinking, yeah, it is actually. He has a lot of like specialized modules on there, but they're not that specialized. He has a lot of blue. Super capitals usually have a lot of purple, which is even more specialized as far as modules. And I'm talking about the color of the little plus mark that sits on top of a module distinguishes its rarity and its price. So you can go from a normal module, which just looks normal, has no plus, no sign anywhere, to a green module, which is a faction module. Those are a little more rare, and they probably cost, well, it totally depends really, but let's just say it costs about 10 times as much as a normal module. But then you go from green to blue, and now you're talking, say, 50 to 100 times the value of a normal module. And then you go from blue to purple, and purples are the most expensive version of a module that you can get. And we're talking about normal modules through faction and through loot drops and stuff like that. We're not talking about abyssal mutated modules. And so you have these purple modules that are the most expensive. So normally when you see the destruction of a very, very expensive ship, like a Titan, you'll see a lot of purple modules on it. Purple and blue, a mixture of those two. If you're seeing green modules on it, there may not be blue and purple available for that type of module, or somebody has just settled with something that wasn't that important. But the important stuff like a tank, you're going to see a lot of purple usually. And here you see a lot of blue. So he didn't put a lot into and actually some green. I think that's so the point is this fit is not, he didn't spend a lot of money on the fit basically. And you know why that is? Well, this is a vendetta, so I don't know what the excuse is here. Pittsburgh did that. But normally, when you have a super capital ship, they're actually only Technology 1, T1, or Tech 1, the way we used to call it. And that means that they, as I was talking before, their price has completely depreciated from 100 to 110, 120 million down to like 40 to 50, billion, not million, billion. And Pandemic Legion was actually talking about, hey, instead of putting a bunch of money into your modules, which might cost you 10, 20, maybe 30 billion to fit it right, instead of putting all that money into expensive modules that you're going to put into only a 40, 50 billion-ish ship, just buy a second one and use it as a T1. And so some of the trend has been to just fit a Titan with good enough modules, but not great modules, or a Supercarrier. And that way, just buy yourself a second Supercarrier instead, since the price has dropped so far. It's a very interesting strategy. the thing is, this is a vendetta. It's not a nix. So this thing is still worth 80, 90 billion. So you're going to want to have nice stuff on it to protect it as long as you can. Now, cutting through all that talk about economics and fitting and cost is the reality of how you're going to use it. What is good enough? And it's not an issue of money maybe, but it's an issue of just figuring out like how much you actually want to put on a ship, because you're only going to use it either rarely or you're going to use it in fleets that are not going to endanger it. I don't actually know what psychology is behind this fit, but it certainly comes up short for a vendetta, unless literally he has 2 or 3 of them. And I know that Pittsburgh, he just left the Imperium, and he was one of the people who actually arranged for the sacking of the Locust fleet, which is a very big deal. Killed 50 Rorquals. I think it was 450 billion in damage, 450 billion in damage. So this guy is not a small player. He's a big FC. He certainly could afford better modules. So I don't know what happened here. All right.
When I
Go ahead.
when I first saw, this, and Jay showed it to me, 2 things, kind of went through my mind, which was, one, like good on Pitts for like playing the way he wants to play and just risking things and just fighting and having a great time, right? Because this is the way you want to lose a Nix, right? Like you want to lose it, not necessarily like in a dread bomb.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I mean, you don't want to lose it like necessarily in a dread bomb, but at least it wasn't, AFK on a gate or, something silly, right?
Some
It was
accident.
at least it was in a fight. Yeah, like something.
Well, that's the difference between
ratting, right?
Yeah. That's the difference between an FC dying and a typical player dying. They're rich players, right? But they're not fleet commanders, which means when they're out there doing something like attacking something by themselves in their expensive ship, which they can have because they make money, and they start to get harassed and tackled and are about to be destroyed, they can't really call for help. Unless they're well liked and they have to call for an FC. The FC has to say, yeah, let's get in there, let's save this guy, let's go. And then the cavalry comes in and saves you and says, don't do that again. But when you're an FC, when you're the fleet commander, you skip that whole step of having to call a fleet commander who's on night watch, right? Because usually they have a fleet commander who's on watch. The fleet commander gets into trouble. He has the button to say, form up right now, get everybody in, save me right now. And that's the difference between a fleet commander getting into trouble and a typical pilot that belongs to an alliance getting into trouble. There's a whole different alert system that happens, or a different speed of how much help they can bring. But this might have been something that happened off hours, so people couldn't really jump in to save him. Who knows what happened here?
Absolutely. I have pings ready to just be copy and pasted.
Because you're a fleet commander.
Oh, yeah. And the second thing, I thought is we've said this guy's name more times in the past 3 months, or the past 3 weeks, than we have in the past year, right? So it's like,
it's his
what's
time.
he going to do? What's he going to do next week?
Yeah.
It's like Britney Spears. Can't help it. He's in the news.
Maybe this is like actual media genius where he's like, oh, my name's starting to fall out of the news. I better do something quick. Whether it's good or bad, I better get my name back up on the news, because we have been talking about Pittsburgh for a few weeks now. He's just such an interesting FC at an interesting time. And he is doing interesting things and also representing interesting things. So yeah, we're going to talk about him because he's interesting.
So is he going to be on the GIS raffle payroll?
I don't know.
Wait, hold on. Am I getting paid? Whoa. Let's.
He's jumping. Caleb's jumping way ahead. We haven't even.
It's Casino Wars 2.0. It's coming.
Yeah, maybe. All right, let's move off
big
this.
Raffle wars.
Let's move off the Pittsburgh thing. Oh, I did want to say this. Rote Capel, right? One of those little groups that we were talking about. One of the leaders in that little area. Let's see here. Let's zoom in on these guys. Rote Capel. So this was in the north, right? Because you have Trigger Happy is right here in the middle of the screen, and they look like they're. Is that Tribute? It looks like it's part of Tribute. And right next to them is Rote Capel and Unspoken Alliance. And all these guys, none of them are really working together, and they're all working as independent entities, and they want to keep it that way. So you have smaller alliances doing their own thing, not something as part of a larger agenda. Trigger Happy is probably the newest arrival there, and that is led by Kendar. And Kendar is, again, former Goonswarm FC. He's doing his own thing. The alliance is called Trigger Happy. Pittsburgh is also a former Goonswarm FC, and he's joined Kendar up there, as have a few other people. And Trigger Happy has grown like crazy. So there you have Rote taking down a Trigger Happy vendetta. That is really interesting stuff going on there.
Another kind of interesting, just kind of in the know, was on that kill mail, I think the second or third person down. If anyone has watched the show, watched our interview, I talked to Pittsburgh about the thing. The conifers is where, his newest target is going to be. So that's just kind of like the backstory that, you would only really know if you've kind of paid attention to it and all that. But I think it's just, I love the stories of this stuff. It's great.
Yeah. North right now is very exciting, not necessarily for the war that's going on in the North, but just the chaos that's going on inside of Tribute, basically. You have Rote, Trigger Happy. You also have Scumlords in there, Centipede Caliphate, Forsaken Empire, and of course Unspoken Alliance. Unspoken distinguished themselves in the South when they were basically blockading and harassing the renters in Brothers of Tangra, or BOT. They resisted Apollo 428's basically militia for a long time and made their life miserable. And it wasn't until NC came down and said, all right, let's clear out Unspoken. And then, you couldn't resist the power of NC dot. They cleared them out. And Unspoken came up north where there was less influence from Northern Coalition. And they are making a name for themselves there. It's a lot of tough talk today about military stuff. Let's go to Pirate attacking structures in HiSec. This is kind of interesting. Don't know much about it, but Arya, are you still awake? Are you still in here? Did we lose him? Oh, he took off. He was going to tell me about that.
Is it Return of the King?
No, it's PIRAT is a group of mercenaries that works in basically the Empire space. So we'll just go to this area here. And PIRAT is known for enforcing contracts for is it I Choose You, or is it the competitor? What's Jeronica's company's name? I forgot. Yeti.
Yeah, it's for the entire trade consortium.
Well, now they're merged, right? Like, this is one of the stories hasn't been reported on in EVE Online very well. And I do know a lot about it, but I didn't write about it because I came into some information in a very privileged way. I didn't want to. Plus, writing takes a long time, so I'm not writing much anymore. But the idea is that it goes on in here is you had two groups that were basically fighting for the financial sector inside of Empire space. And the lucrative money in that area comes from something called offshoring. And there are a couple of players who want to build industry and basically be a tax haven for people who are buying mostly, almost completely RMT stuff. And RMT is real money trading. And what that means is people who buy Plex, which essentially is time in this game. You can buy your pilot's license for a month in the game if you want to. And that sells for a lot of money. And skill injectors, which is also capsulated time, right? It's other people's skills in an injector that you inject into yourself, and then you get skill points that you can allocate where you want, 500,000 skill points at a time. And also extractors, and to a lesser extent, multi-training licenses, which allow you to train 2 characters on an account as opposed to 1, 2 or 3, depending on how many you use. Those are RMT, right? So they're legitimate RMT, so it's not illicit RMT where you're stealing from CCP's pocket. This is legitimate. CCP has sanctioned this. The money goes into their pocket at the end of the day. You're supporting the game, et cetera, et cetera. Those things sell like crazy. And so and they sell usually near trade hubs where everybody is or has an alt. So that's where the real business for this actually happens. So Jita is a big place for that, but you also have Amar. And so Eve Mongol was it? No, not Eve Mongol, Eve Mogul. I got this thing from Mongolia today. Okay, so Eve Mogul and I Choose You are two groups that don't like each other necessarily, and they're competitive. And for a long time, I Choose You had contracts with Horde. Well, actually, an FC in Horde. And he basically enforced the destruction of competition for I Choose You. And Eve Mogul, on the other hand, had Pandemic Legion helping him out, but not really. He was living among Pandemic Legion. Eve Mongrel. So he had kind of Pandemic Legion, but literally Pandemic Legion kind of turned on him and threatened him. So it gets really interesting. I'll just go into it a little bit, but Eve Mogul was stuck in a terrible position of trying to be free ports. Basically, anybody can do business with him. Just come in and park there and do stuff. Well, those free ports that are factories and engineering complexes and trade hubs that were in PL space, I'm talking about MTEC-O, were used by Tissue, which is a pretty powerful, I don't know what you would call them, disrupting group, to make attacks on the North. And this is at a time where it's pacified and PL's making money off those renters, and so is NC. And so Eve Mogul basically has to say, hey, you guys, this is a free port. I'm not supposed to lock them out. And PL's like, you're going to lock them out, or we're going to take you down and we'll destroy the structures ourselves. So they kind of turned on Eve Mogul and said, yeah, you can't be a free port. You've got political realities. There are people who are using your factories not to build anything, but to attack our renters. That's our money source, and we're not going to let you do that. So there was a lot of tension there. And then, of course, Pandemic Legion came up north and just kind of wiped the place out anyway. And they were going to go after Eve Mogul and destroy him too, destroy what he'd built. His name is Dronica. He's a friend of the show. But instead, what happened is the drifters popped up and started attacking stuff in the south. And essentially, Imperium kind of freaked out and said, oh, we got to get down there and defend these guys, this group. So we'll leave Eve Mogul for another day. They destroyed the stuff in MTEC-O. But they were going to chase him down through HiSec and destroy all his financial buildings, right? And he has anything that has... Caleb, are you here? What's his... Eve Yeti. Like any of the Yeti buildings are Eve Mogul. But I think the drifters were a pretty easy excuse. I think what happened is this series of events, and this is conjecture. I wasn't in Imperium ever, and in any significant way at this time. What happens is drifters pop up at a time when Tribute is just about done. The only thing they're going to do is wipe out Eve Mogul and go down into HiSec to kind of do it, which is kind of taxing because it's structural warfare and it's through HiSec. And a lot of your fighters are going to get into trouble with Concord because they're outlaws. So you're bringing outlaws into a place that's got Empire police. That's a bad situation for quite a few members of your fleet. So it's not pain-free to go after somebody in HiSec. People can't participate in that, and the less people you have doing it, the longer it takes, and it starts to wear on your team. They get tired. So it was not a great prospect, but it was something they could certainly do. But drifters popped up, and so they said, nope, let's turn around and let's go down south because we need to go down there to take on these drifters, and they were complaining that there was no way to defend against it and all this stuff. And then that was the first 24 hours. The second 24 hours, the Imperium was saying like, yeah, we were terrified of them a day ago, and we think it's terrible gameplay, but we got it under control. We know how to handle it, and it doesn't take very much work. And so that was one day to the next, basically, maybe 48 hours. But by then, they'd already told their troops in the north to head south, and I think they wanted to anyway. So it was a convenient excuse to march everybody all the way back down south and to basically complain that a war was ended because the CCP decided to throw these drifters up that were attacking structures, and that's just cheating because CCP shouldn't in any way interfere with the game when there's a war going on. And that was one of the narratives that was being spun. I think it was kind of a false narrative. Yeah, I do trivialize the drifter invasion because I don't think it was nearly as destructive as people say. Ron was there, and Ron was taking them on, and he can probably speak to it more than I can. But of all the damage the drifters did, only one structure was destroyed, and it was offline. So drifters did not destroy a bunch of things. And they can say, sure, that's because we turned around and reacted so fast and figured out how to thwart it and all this other stuff, and it was bugged, and CCP stopped it and all this other stuff. But the reality is, in retrospect, the drifters did nothing but scare people. They really didn't destroy a lot of things. Ron, you want to jump in and say that I'm wrong?
I totally agree. I think, I don't know, I kind of feel like, the Imperium response to the Drifter was appropriate. We have a lot of people, and it's a big machine, and you need to jump in front of things before it spirals out of control. And you have a lot of structures that are getting hit, and you don't know why or how. So they turned around, and everyone kind of made a big deal out of it. But Matani needed to make that call to move that train around. It takes a while, and then for me personally, I had a really fun time with it. It was really powerful NPCs that were roaming around in these random bands, and it was just really cool. It was different and interesting, and I formed a SIG out of it that is continued to this day of 4 or 5 of us kind of jumping together and hitting it, and it was a lot of fun. I love that kind of stuff, the change and the interesting part of it.
Yeah,
it was a great time.
Underplay the drifter attack, right? Because it was potentially, from the looks of it, it could have led to some sort of Boudica moment for the Imperium, right? You don't want to have all your troops staged elsewhere if suddenly there's an opening happening for vandals at your door, right? So you have to bring the troops.
Yeah, you have to bring them home. The decision has to be fast. I agree with everything you guys are saying. I think, though, after you make that decision, you cannot turn the machine around again. So after you say, hey, let's march the guys south, let's do what you guys are saying to do, everybody starts moving or making preparations to move. Some people jump ahead. You all of a sudden start stretching out your military because some people are ahead of the other group because they want to get down there faster. You can't at any point then say, okay, everybody, never mind, we have it under control. Stop where you are, turn around, and go back up north. It's not a good way to move big groups of people. It's very confusing. You can't move them around like you're in a race car. It's a tanker. It takes a long time. So I think that's what that was. But I think the narrative that it stopped a war is a little bit overblown. In any case, what we're talking about is not related to the drifters, so we got a little bit off track there. But that's what happened. So Eve Mogul survives because the drifters started to attack down south and pulled the Imperium's attention away from him. So you have Eve Mogul now surviving, and you still have IC, or I Choose You, in his competitor living in that area. And so what happens is the Imperium, I think, instead says, well, we were going to destroy Eve Mogul, but what if we do this? What if we say, Eve Mogul and I Choose You, you guys make friends and work together, work it out. I don't care how you do it. We want a cut of the profits. Test is taking a cut of the profits. Test by this point has settled with Horde because Horde used to protect the Jita market for the offshoring money that was being made there. Horde is now out of a job because Test took over that market, and Test is actually and Horde is actually fighting Test, I think, for a while.
Yeah,
they were fighting over the offshoring money that was available in HiSec, right? And that went on for a while.
Yeah, and my kind of joke about it is, Pandemic Horde was about 13 jumps away, and they could come and create a timer anytime they wanted. So, my joke is, how long can you make a nullsec alliance clone jump to Jita to do a timer? And the answer is 4 months. After 4 months, we're good. So, basically, Pandemic Horde, through their incessant timer creating, just forced us to the diplomatic table on that.
And this is really the takeaway from this should be that the fact that something like offshoring, even though it's only focused primarily on the RMT items, so mostly on Plex and related items, that created all of the content you just mentioned, right? it built up the entire infrastructure of Mogul. It got the whole thing with offshore conflict up and running. It got all these political shenanigans happening in the background, right? This should be a clue to someone like CCP. We need more of this, not less. We need a complete nerfing of NPC-centric unassailable wealth, right? This is what we want more of. If you moved all the actual raw material and production aspects, all of it, onto player-owned structures, you would see a lot more of this happening. This would be a massive content driver, right? Mm-hmm. But on a totally different scale than staging fights, right? So I'm just saying that I don't necessarily like the fact that these things have been funded on RMT items alone, but if we took this as a clue, as an experiment, and say, okay, this is what happened with offshoring. This is how much potential there is in shifting everything away from the NPC-centric production.
Okay, let me get back to the actual story so we can get to the point of PIRAT, which we were going to talk about. Thank you, though. I appreciate that analysis. So you have this offshoring. It's lucrative. It was fought over by Horde and Test. That war was exciting at first and very interesting, and then within a couple of weeks, it was boring as could be. Ron, again, is in there in the middle of it, actually still fighting it out and showing people how it's happening on his stream. And so all that is happening, but Horde basically says, hey, let's stop fighting. Let's actually make money together. And Vili asks Goonswarm if that would be okay, because Goonswarm, Imperium, led by Goonswarm, does not like Horde. They do not like them at all. It's enemy number one, because they realized that was a competitive force to them. It was the same model. Have a lot of new players in this group and offer them excitement of nullsec in exchange for loyalty in combat. And so they're similar groups. They see it as competition. They don't like Horde. They're on the record. Usually when Gobbin's names comes up, they're usually talking really badly about him, their leader, the Horde's leader. So these are groups that don't like each other. And you have Test in the middle brokering a deal where they all make money off the offshoring and they split it up. So Goonswarm gets a little bit of it. Actually, not very much, it turns out. Horde and Test kind of split it up among themselves mostly. And so everybody's paid off. And so now it's a matter of consolidating the financiers, right? So the military powers of outlaw space have basically said, we have an interest in this money around this market. There's competitive forces for it. You have Eve Mogul on one side and I choose you on the other. And the nullsec powers are saying, get together or one of you is going to die. We don't care who it is, kind of thing. And so they have to work out who's going to carry what territory, and those kind of negotiations that are financial start to happen. This is about the time where you see the leader of the Imperium and Goonswarm, Matani, start talking about all the delicious money they're going to make in high sec because deals are being worked out and there's some funny things happening. That's when he was talking about that sort of thing. So that was a few months ago. So
if I can just poke at you, right? Because I'm not going to derail this into a real life politics talk, right? But just before we went on air, you and I were talking about how it's always about the money, and it's always about things like scarce resources like water, right? Seriously, CCP needs to take a page out of real life and realize this is what drives content in a game like Eve. We need these things. It is so destructive that they have turned these knobs down, because there is nothing fun about Eve if we do not have these incentives to actually fight. I'm not saying that we should have something as horrible as the scarcity of water, but we need to actually start thinking about these things, because that is what's going to bring about all the politics, all the drama that you've just spent almost an hour talking about. That's where they come from, right?
I got you, right. Things to fight over, conflict drivers, they call it. Back to the story, because I'm almost finished, because we bring in PIRAT at this point. Now, one of the groups, those financial groups, they don't have militaries. They don't have a bunch of guys, except maybe 2 or 3 financial guys that are helping them build models. They don't have an army to protect them. They have to hire mercenaries. And among the mercenaries in high sec is a group called PIRAT. And pirate you can hire to defend your structures or to attack structures of competitors so that they can't have their structures competing with yours and creating their own tax haven. So you destroy other people's tax havens so that yours is the only tax haven that's collecting all the money. And the people, the consumers that are buying, have no ethics at all, or they don't care. They just want to save money. So if they're going to save a few pennies on a Plex here, they'll go ahead and do it. If they're going to lose 1% by paying one person as opposed to saving 1%, they're going to go with whoever the save 1% is. And so the real threat to any tax haven is a competitor that will undertax your clientele, because the clientele will move to that competitor.
Sometimes. This is very
Most
much
of the
like
time.
mobster stories, right? You have these two families that are feuding, and then you have them hiring muscles and doing all this racketeering and basically using violence, like hiring Pirate or MC and Noir and whatnot. All these mercenary groups that existed in the past, most of them have died because there's not that much money going around. But again, this is back to the point that all this content is created when you have these things to fight over. And then, of course, you always see this consolidation of power, right? When all this mobster stuff has grown to a certain size, you have like 4 different groups in an area, and then they come to some agreement and peace, and then you have peacetime until something dramatic happens, like someone starts undercutting, or someone starts protecting a newcomer that disrupts the whole pricing scheme. So there's always this drama potentially in the mix, right? And this goes back all the way to in the very early day of Eve, when we didn't really have these problems with too many resources and things like that. Many of the projects that started back then were always funded by these conniving industrialists and market guys and people that did scams and all of that stuff, right? Big money needs to be on the table to have big conflict or big projects, right? So that is what we need to have something of that back.
All right, let me cut you off because now we have Pirate entering. They've always been in high sec. They're a mercenary group, and they're paid off, I believe.
Gankers.
What's that?
They're gankers. They're borderline griefers, right? But they are muscle,
but they're
and you
effective.
hire muscle.
But they're muscle, and here's the thing that people should know about Pirate. They are very effective. When they are paid to take out a group, they take out that group, and they do it. They make all their timers, and they are very efficient at doing it, much more efficient and much more reliable than nullsec mercenaries like Horde, for instance. So you have
to bring in the narrative that these groups that are small or medium-sized mercenaries, they're pretty big. But the interesting thing really is that we have seen the null entities doing this whole franchising of the same thing and getting a piece of that pie and participating in those conflicts, right? This is really what's so interesting about this era that we haven't really seen before, because it's the first time that Null has actually shown an interest in high-sec shenanigans, at least since like 2006.
Ron, you were there. You were fighting in the, what do you call it? The perimeter police department or something? What was that group?
Yeah. So the perimeter police department is just a high-sec corporation that deals with, enemy offshores, right? Trying to undercut us, trying to, just siphon money away from the perimeter Keepstar, right? So it's really interesting because Pirate, and we had them on the show 3 or 4 months ago when all of those war deck changes were happening, and they were on the show, and he was really, really frank about what they did, and they did it for easy kills, and they did it because it was easy money and this and that. But they, were very effective. They, almost too effective, to be honest, with going after just about any new group, that popped up. And they were ready, when I talked to them last, they were ready for the wrath of New Eden to come down on them.
Right.
And, we were kind of joking that a bunch of groups all sort of gathered together under that pirate flag. And I called them Super Voltron Pirate, that they all kind of group together, and they're all, very interesting and different egos and different leaders. And, I wanted to see how they would get along, and they all kind of joined together and they stationed out of one place. And then, they got hired by the trade agreement guys, and, they've been going around cleaning up all the randomness, because the one thing is they live in HiSec, that's where they go. So, whereas most nullsec groups, we all, live in nullsec, and that's where all of our stuff is, and that's where we rat and everything. So they live in HiSec, they do everything up in HiSec, and I mean, that's that story. And then the other story, from me personally, I mean, you probably know where that's going.
Go ahead if you want. Well, let me finish. Let me get to the end of the story, because I feel like by now it's anticlimactic. But so you're in Test's police department that wipes out competition. Eve Mogul has PIRAT. I think they hire PIRAT to do their cleaning up and eliminating of competition. And I Choose You uses Horde. So those are the three militaries that work for these industrialists to corner the market on this lucrative Plex and injector markets. And so what happens is, because the threat of being annihilated by Goonswarm, probably in Test as well, is that I don't know who presented it, but basically I think it was probably Gobbins talking to Villy, said, hey, let's stop fighting, let's split the money. And Villy said, okay, let me check with my allies. He made sure it was okay as a diplomat, and basically they say, let's all work together and let's make these financiers kind of merge together and work. And that's basically the story. I hope I don't have too many details wrong. And so you have details being banged out about, well, I Choose You or Eve Mogul, which name should we work under, because they don't like each other. And people trust Eve Mogul more, is the case that Eve Mogul makes. And you have who's going to control Lamar, who's going to control Jita, but because basically the money's all going into the same pool now that's going to feed the the financiers, and also the nullsec police departments around the map. And that's where that went. And PIRAT, at this point, PIRAT goes from being a police department for Eve Mogul. Not that's one of their gigs, right? Because they're mercenaries. They have other gigs too. They're gankers, and yes, all the other stuff that I agree with. They actually destroy small groups. And in the middle of all this is a mechanical change to the game that basically says you can't be invulnerable as mercenaries. So if you're going to be a mercenary group and declare war on people, you have to have a structure that can be destroyed. And by the destruction of that structure, you will lose your right to declare war on all the groups you have active wars on. In other words, if I declare war on 5 groups, I have to put a structure down and say, that's my headquarters for the war. If those 5 groups destroy, any one of those 5 groups or all of them together destroy my headquarters, then my wars on those 5 groups are nullified and I can't war them again for 2 weeks. So you saw that happen once, where PIRAT's headquarters was destroyed by everybody who was being warred by them. And this is the environment now that PIRAT actually is existing in these days. So all that to say, when we see PIRAT, we think about all that stuff that they were involved with earlier on. And they're attacking and war decking a group that has appealed to the Imperium to fight PIRAT on their behalf. And that's something that happened just yesterday, or actually just today.
No, what's the name of that group?
I didn't write it down, and Arya...
Is it Return of the King? Because that's the story that I know that got me all worked up in the past couple of days.
I've heard that name, Return of the King. I don't know if that's who this was.
But you can see how this whole thing is actually looking as if it's pointing towards a very positive future, right? I am not very positive about raffles and gambling, but the actual potential of that money being utilized to actually create content, this is really interesting to me, because the fact that they are talking about fixing some of the scarcity issues, the fact that we're getting the raffle, which will redistribute all, it's actually going to siphon wealth into a top of people that can then be deciding factors, pretty much like back in the casino days. And if we get some changes to industrialists and market boosts, there's going to be a lot of money willing to actually create content and fights, right? Because mercenaries are very PvP centric. They only want to fight, and most PvPers have this hatred towards PvE or money making. They just want to kill shit, and this is exactly what you can get if you outsource all the work that creates value, creates resources, and creates money back to the industrialists, back to the call them Care Bears. You're going to get this kind of content.
Disclaimer is Caleb actually works with Eve Mogul, by the way, and well,
no, I'm just an advisor.
Just an admirer, okay.
Advisor.
Yeah. Well, you have some. There's a bit of a conflict of interest there, but go ahead, Ron.
I know I'm a little bit of a stakeholder, but only vicariously, right? Because I've pretty much helped Veronica since day one. But
I love
this
Veronica
proves
too.
that this content is what emerges if you have this type of design.
Okay, so that's great, but Return of the King is a brand new corporation, and it is of the Korean players. They all kind of joined together, and they started a brand new corporation. And if you go to Zkill and look up the Alliance Return of the King, what happened, and this was related to me by Korean players that came into chat and were, seeing what I could do for them. And apparently this is a lot of buzz on the Korean message boards that their CEO did not understand what he was doing when he put down a structure. And if you scroll down, it's like, it's not good. It's not good.
They got wiped out. Oh no.
It's not good.
What's not good?
So they've just been absolutely slaughtered, right? Like this is
by PIRAT. Look at that. PIRAT.
This is like, running through an elementary school with a wiffle ball bat or something.
Oof,
it's
that's
just like
bad. Yeah,
it's just like pow 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 pow. Like what? Like so apparently the CEO is new, and if you look at the executor, he's only like 16 or 17 days old as well.
Wow.
And they just kind of stumbled into this, and they came to me and they were like, well, what can you do? And I'm like, wait, what? Like, and it was just horrible.
Let me break this down for players who may not understand what's going on. A new corporation is born. They are immune to being attacked. So nobody can attack them unless they're being ganked, which can happen anywhere at any place. We won't get into that. But they can't be warred. And if they're not warred, then they can't be killed without some kind of penalty going to the people who are killing them. So there's a little bit of safety in being a new corporation. The problem is, the minute you put down a structure and own it, you declare that your group is now vulnerable to war decks. That's because one of the requirements to be declared war on, I think that's the way to say it, or having war declared on you, is to have a structure, at least one structure anywhere on the map, whether it's null sec or low sec or high sec. So as soon as that CEO, who is a novice, said, this is a really cool game, let's put our headquarters down here. So he puts down a headquarters where his guys can live and work and basically group. By doing that, he opened himself up to a vulnerability of having a war declared on him, which it looks like PIRAT did. And PIRAT has been punishing his players, essentially oppressing them. Because these are all new players. You can look at, now why do I know they're being oppressed? Because look at the ships that are being destroyed. They're all beginner frigates. And this is the kind of garbage gameplay that PIRAT cannot explain their way out of. They are destroying people who are trying to get a feel for the game, intimidating them, oppressing them, and making the game, I mean, some people say that's great fun, but eventually people break when they don't have a chance to really experience the game. They could be having a ball, maybe, but we've seen a lot of people leave the game when they're in this situation of being oppressed by a group that they don't know how to defeat or even fight back against, or even participate in the game because they're being killed all the time. We know the statistics from CCP that this is a recipe for bad retention of new players. And this is something that we've all been excited about, Korean players joining this game. So this is a Korean corporation, novices, don't understand the game, essentially being oppressed by pirate.
So, because Matterall, you and I have very similar sensibilities. So, yeah, I was hoping that, you would let the hate flow through you like I did.
Hey, just turn me
When
to
I
the dark
heard
side.
this, I mean, honestly, like when I hear this story, like, I stopped what I was doing and I went and I was researching and looking. And, my first reaction is one, can I burn down everything that Pirate owns, right? That's my first reaction. You know, Second reaction is, what can I do? Can I talk to Pirate or, and I pinged, Dran, is there anything that we can do? Not really,
Dran's a diplomat for test.
Yeah, he's the head diplomat and he's the leader of Legacy. He's, the second in command for Test, and yeah, he's pretty much, he pretty much makes most of the decisions. So, there wasn't much that he could do, so then my next reaction is, get a message to them, which, I did, and I had a couple of Korean players send the CEO messages, about how to unanchor that structure. One, two, let it be destroyed. Don't defend it if they're hitting it. And three, transfer it to somewhere else. Just get rid of it. Give it away. Who cares? Just get it away from, their alliance to make them, that makes them war eligible. And then the next one is, if it continues like this, I mean, sadly, leave the alliance and form another corporation. Maybe it's Return of the King dot and join that and just let this one go away.
Yeah, there's ways
And
to
then,
hide your... Sorry, go ahead.
no, yeah, no, and I mean, and then the last one is just, from my work, right? So, I don't know personally what the user experience is. Is there a huge warning? Is there a sort of notification? Is it a little small box that you hit OK? What are they getting an appropriate response or an appropriate warning to the ramifications of their actions before they do that, right? So is there something I could do in the UI to kind of prevent this?
I think it's just... at this point, you have to look at it and say, this is a situation that's... I mean, Eve has to be tough. It has to be really tough because people want to play tough games. They want to survive and master tough games. The tougher, the better. The problem is you want expected gameplay so people understand what they're doing. So they feel like, it's a matter of improving.
Exactly.
And in this case, it's very mysterious that if you put down a structure, it seems like a very normal thing to do as a CEO for your guys that you're trying to bring into the game, that shouldn't have the kind of unforeseen consequences that they're suffering now. And again, I say they're suffering because they're being destroyed. They may be having a ball saying, wow, this is really great. Or they may be in absolute confusion saying, why can these guys kill us? We're supposed to be protected by the space police. We don't know how they're reacting. But they are appealing for help, so they must be figuring out that they're in trouble and they need someone to bail them out because they have a structure and they're now being warred by Pirate.
I think you just hit the nail on the head there, with the expected gameplay. I'm down for, brutality. I'm down for, all these sorts of things as long as they know, as long as they understand. When I first started playing Eve many, many moons ago, I got into an argument, and later it was, I found out it was CCP Falcon. But, I mean, this was like years later. I'm like, oh, wow, that's Falcon. And I got into an argument with Falcon, and, and my thing was about the contract scams of the time, and this is like 2010. And the contract scams, the way the information was presented was very murky. And I didn't feel that there was any clarity on what you were getting and what you were receiving. And it was just very garbled. Yeah. And, and I was arguing with CCP Falcon, who happened to be in the help channel at the time, that this isn't scamming, right? This is just, kind of paper trickery, getting someone to sign something that they don't know what it is, right? And, And he was like, well, it's harsh and blah, blah, blah. Well, but that's like making me sign a contract in Japanese, right? That's not harsh. That's just, trickery, right? So as long as they understand, as long as they truly know that if I hit OK, this, I can go to be put at war and everything can be destroyed, then right on, man.
It's not really that it was not as extreme as if it was in Chinese. It's just that people are lazy and they will skip parts and not read their contracts properly. So we've gotten a lot of UI design help since then, and a lot of checkboxes. It's almost like regulated by now, right? There's no real easy scams to make anymore.
Well, I think that's what Ron was asking. He's not sure what in any of the literature in the game tells you you are now open to having a war declared on you.
I'm just trying to point out that if you compare this to real life scams, I think we are at a point where CCP should stop trying to protect the players, because it's going to
whoa, kitty cat.
No.
It's true. Real life has scams, and it exists.
I wasn't saying that. We have Harvey Skywalker in the channel with us, and also Fonsway. How are you guys? Good to have you here.
How are you?
Fonsway, you were going to jump in here. What were you going to say?
I think I'd like to offer an alternate viewpoint, not necessarily that this is 100% right or 100% fully formed, but I think that we need to consider, so first and foremost, the appropriate response, like as a community, the counterplay, and not necessarily as a player, the counterplay to this, but as a community, if we don't like this, or if we want these people to survive in the game. Not that if we don't like it, but if we want them to survive in the game, then our counterplay is to reach out to the victims and inform them, educate them. There are many solutions to a single war deck. You transfer the structure to a shell corporation and you're instantly, you're safe again. Send the guy a bunch of ISK and tell him to transfer the structure to you. You buy it off him, and it's gone that way. And now the immediate bleeding of that particular corporation being farmed is stopped, and all it took was a moment of communication. I'm not saying that PIRAT are awesome dudes, but I think that we may wish to consider that they are simply introducing new players to one of the harshest realities of the game, which is not going away and not going to change. And there are specific areas where these players are protected from these things, and it's the newbie zones where you can't be ganked. And that's it. You stay in those systems, and once you're out of there, that's it.
The whole point of building a group, right? As a group, the whole point of this game is to fail upwards. It's
right. It's how you react, how you respond to these challenges.
Yeah, and failing and getting wiped because you made the mistake of jumping in before you had actually done the due diligence and figured
the guy
out how
didn't
things
read.
work, right? That's part of the game. You should have more of that, not less.
So Ash put it very clearly in chat. He says, PIRAT is a representation of a force of nature within EVE Online. And they are not the only representation of this force of nature. They are one of its many faces. If we stop focusing on how good or bad the souls of the players behind the PIRAT characters are, and we just simply start thinking about the fact that they exist and the fact that they're going to do this, and how are we as a community going to respond to it, how are these individual new players going to respond to it, then I think that that's the emerging gameplay that this game was built to support.
By the way, it should be said, hold on a second, Caleb, hold on. All right, make your point, but quick.
This is a social incentive, because if you have failed, right, and there is no easy access to the information, you're forced to talk to another player saying, why did I fail?
Okay, these guys are not a small group. I wanted to point that out. It's not 10, 12, 20 guys. This is 423 members, started just a few days ago. That's a big group coming into EVE Online. I'm not saying they need specific protections, and maybe they're doing exactly what they need to do by calling Ron or other people and saying, help us out. We're getting attacked by this mercenary group. What can you do to help us out? I don't actually know the situation very well, but it seems to me this is not just a group of noobs coming into a game. This is looks like an outfit that's transitioning from a different game to this one, or some kind of a club that has a wing for EVE Online. Very interesting. I think you do want to foster these kinds of groups, though, because this has the potential to...
Then my bar for them is higher.
Yeah, maybe it should be higher, but we also have a reality of we don't want to chase people out of the game, especially right now.
Well,
Well,
if we stop thinking about income and all that stuff and start thinking only about making a good game, then perhaps a strong filter is the best filter. And I'm not necessarily saying I'm behind all of these ideas 100%. I'm just trying to offer an alternate viewpoint.
I got you. But look at this. They're coming in at about 470 players, and they're down to about 425 players. That might be normal. Actually, 423. That might be normal, or it might be people getting chased out before they get a chance to enjoy other aspects of the game, the more introductory aspects. We'll see. I don't know. Harvey, how's it going?
Right. Yeah, not bad. I was just gonna say, like, Ron, if you give them my name, get them to send me, like, say, a small sort of handling fee, and then, like, say, 20 billion or something, and then I'll buy their structure off of them afterwards, and then all the war's gone away, and it'll solve all their problems. Just
uh,
Harvey Skywalker, 20 billion game, done.
so number one, I'm still working on my Harvey soundboard, so please continue, sir. Number two, but will you go kill Pirate? Like, will you go shoot them?
Yeah, I'll promise anything. 20 bill, send it in game. All the problems will go away.
Harvey, I'll pay their bill. I'll pay the 20 billion to you as a mercenary.
No, I'm not
to
scamming
go
you,
there.
Matt Roll. No way.
Oh, well, see, here we
Oh,
go.
okay.
All right. No,
Okay.
Damn it, Harvey.
There, I outed your
imagine
scam.
me shaking my fist at the sky. Harvey!
God damn it.
Oh, I appreciate you not scamming me. Whew, that makes me happy.
What,
Pay
who are
up
these?
front.
I only came in at the end here, so I don't know
Yeah,
who
yeah.
these guys are or what's going on.
We're good.
Someone.
Go ahead.
Go on.
Go ahead. What were you going to say?
No, I got nothing. I don't know. Just
Yeah.
So, Return of the King is a corporation, a new corporation that is formed by this recent influx of Korean players. It's a group of Korean players that started a corporation, and their CEO, who is also equally new, wasn't aware, or I don't know, maybe he just wasn't smart enough, or he didn't realize that when he put down a structure, he was able to get war decked. So they've been war decked by PIRAT and various others, and they've just been absolutely farmed. Their kill board is like it's like 4 pages of red, and it's like ratting ships and hauling and mining
A lot of
and
newbie
all these
ships
sorts
in
of things. Lots of newbie ships, and so I came into the story when I guess it's got a lot of traction in the kind of Korean community. And, I got into the story when, some Korean players came in and were just kind of chatting and asking if there was anything that I could do, and I mean, there's not really much I can do, right? Except, like tell them, get rid of the damn structure, like let it die. Yeah.
Anyway.
well, if they stay, they've come in. If they all come in together, they're going to stay together like that. They're going to struggle, right? They've got to. I don't know how much more of a Korean community there is out there. Obviously, they're cropping up all over the places. It's been opened up. But surely, it'd be better if they sort of. It sounds like it's doomed to fail, is what I'm saying, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like maybe, they'll have a go at that for a while. If the guy who's leading it is as new as all the rest of them and they're really struggling, it's probably going to fail. But then some of them will continue and spread out, join other groups, other Korean groups, and look for something better. It's all part of the journey. We've all been there.
You broke up there. Say it again.
Allow the emergent gameplay to emerge.
Yeah.
This is an age-old problem. How much do we allow new groups to get punished? Do we drive them out of the game before they get a chance to for that seed to actually find soil around it and start to grow into a plant, which would be much stronger for the future? Or do you let things kill it off and eat it as a seed? And I think in nature you see examples of both, right? Birds eat seeds before they become plants. And
it's a balance, right?
Yeah.
It's just a balance, but it's hard to engineer a balance like that. You just sort of like some people just aren't gonna like this game, the way they aren't gonna like the sort of risk reward, the harshness, the things that all of us that have stuck it out, that we all just take for granted and just go, yeah, that's what I signed up. For every one of us, there's got to be a few more that quit the game and were like, nah, I'm not really after that. my life's harsh enough as it is. I'm looking for an easy bit of gaming, just
relax. Yeah.
I like the harshness as a filter. Do I want the CEO that doesn't read? Do I want the players that don't notice or care? Maybe they're not meant for this game. I'm all good for throwing a lot of people at the wall and seeing how many stick. And a retention rate of 30% would be higher than what we're getting now anyway. So throwing a great big giant number of people and keeping the same retention rate will result in a greater increase in players. But I think that just increasing the retention rate a little bit and not overall will be impactful and effective. And engineering that situation isn't necessarily for CCP. It's for us as a community. And we are, so we see this, we don't like it, we're stepping in, we're going to help them. And some players will see what happened and that they got helped, and some players will just still be oblivious and not paying attention, and all they know is they got farmed and
players
it's
are going to
stopped.
step in and try and scam them. Some are going to step in and try and kill them. Some are going to try and help them. Welcome to Eve. It's full of people.
I'm all for letting these 500 people find their own.
They've already got over the first milestone is joining a corp full of people, right? That makes you want to stay. So they've already got past that.
This is also how grudges are built, right? This is how a corp and a group builds their own history and figures out, oh, we got stomped in the face and we made a mistake and we went in half-cocked, right? How do we improve? How do we figure out how to get back on top? How do we hurt the people that hurt us, right? This is exactly the kind of fresh blood that Eve needs more of. So CCP should not step in and try to protect us even further. This is actually exactly what the game is about.
Nobody's saying CCP should, but there is kind of a balance that as in the interest of the game's longer term, you want some plants to grow into trees, because now those birds that were eating the seeds are actually building nests in the trees. It's a system where if you don't overfish a river, the fish will repopulate, and you can always have food coming in instead of eating really well for 1 year and then finding out that all the mateable fish are gone.
So we as a community step in when it's too much, and that's what we've done here. Someone's reached out to them, they're being helped, and this situation will be resolved. And maybe people will keep their eye on this more closely now as a community. But that's for us to engineer and tune as opposed to CCP.
And until they get rid of that structure, they're about to get another bunch of war decks from other people who heard about this big red kill board and these 400 people. And they're like, what's the name again, Ron? Can you just run the name again just so we get the right corp?
Yeah, and TIS has done their part to make their life even more miserable by bringing attention to it.
And so let me just Matterall's point in a different sort of way. So I agree with, pretty much what everyone has said. But I also think, and I don't, mean for CCP to step in or any of this kind of nonsense. Maybe it's just
going to blue them. Is that where we're going with this, Ron?
He's talking about
is that a possibility? Can I talk to their Diplo?
You want to.
Harvey, you know me. I am a crusader, brother. I will burn down heaven and hell to save new players. I don't care.
He's a white knight, and not the.
I am the whitest of the knights. But
my guiding lady. My guiding lady.
The raising of the bar, right? I do, and I appreciate the sandbox, but I think we also, need to think of the future of Eve, right? And if we keep raising this bar or whatever, maybe the bar is at this, height, and everyone who can ride this ride is on this ride. So maybe we need to lower it a little bit. Maybe it helped just to get more people in.
I came into EVE Online, and the first thing I did before I even created a character, I spent like a week or so looking at it because I've heard how hard EVE was. My uncles were playing. They wanted me to play. So I researched for 2 weeks before I even really got into it. And then after that second week, I started a corp and we did our thing. We got war decked, but we managed to negotiate around it. And I was also really fortunate that I had a player who had been playing since the beta join our corp. And so information is the biggest thing. And making sure, like, if new people are coming in, that up front and when they're coming in, there's ways that information is put out there. And up-to-date information on how to do corp stuff, how to settle your wallets, your accesses and whatnot. What happens when you put a structure, the consequences of that.
But I think that's too soon. It's too soon. I consider that advanced gameplay. If I think about it, I come into a game, I'm like, yeah, I want to build a house. It's one of the normal things you do. Look at all these survival games. The first thing you do is you build yourself a shelter. And to make that open up a world of vulnerability that you weren't aware of because you didn't find it, and I think it's kind of obscure to find. And Ron was saying maybe there's no warning when you put down that structure that you are now in danger. It's too soon for that. I think
so. It's just not. It's not that
you're
one
right
mechanic
that,
might not be very intuitive because you're putting down a structure that you think is going to make you more safe when actually it has the opposite effect.
Exactly.
The issue is not the height of the bar. Well, the issue is not the height of the bar. It's that we make it difficult. We haven't made it easy enough for people to step up to it. As you said, the information is obscure. It's hard to find. It takes a lot of effort. If we as a community and CCP both create resources that help for education and make this information more available and easily digestible, then that will help people step up to the bar, and then we don't have to lower it.
Yeah, I don't think we need to lower the bar at all. It needs to be, here's the ledge. You can jump off this ledge and learn to fly, or you're gonna fall flat. But here's the signs on the way to figure it out.
Yeah, I agree.
So as these guys as these guys are walking off the ledge in the middle of the night because they can't see that it's a ledge, you have Harvey back there hopping. You have Harvey back there picking their pocket as they leap off the edge.
Spraying some oil on the edge to make sure they slip.
Yeah, let me hold that for you while you take your first flight.
Let me hold your wallet while you jump.
The other point that Arcanor brings up, and that I was going to mention is, how many Korean Eve wikis are there out there right now? I've been on a lot of Korean streams, and not a lot of English at all. And if it is that sort of very unilanguage sort of culture, and it's just now getting into Korea. I mean, how many wikis can they look up, or how many YouTube videos can they research?
How many are out of date and bad information?
Yeah.
Lots.
Oh, the lack of the localization effort that changed the game client itself and some additional material outside the game into Korean is the barest fraction of what is needed to play the game. We have been saying for as long as the game has existed that the documentation is poor, and in-game and out of game, and that's that learning curve image that everyone likes to link so much. So the localization is the very, very, very first step, and it's absolutely not enough information to play this game properly.
Yeah.
I don't think localization's got that much to do with it, because even if you look at other types of information in say English, it's still not the way to go. If you want to figure out how things work in Eve, you talk to actual people, and there are Koreans in Eve right now that are very, very knowledgeable about the game. They're usually affiliated with some of the existing groups. So if you want to know, your source of information is people that speak your native language that's been playing longer than you.
That's not
sure.
You can't just pull up the thing and find those people more often than not. Like that's not broadcasted when you join the game. Hey, this dude's with such and such group.
That's why they went to Ron, right? Because Tester pretty much blew with everyone. So there's bound to be some Koreans in there to talk to.
Just here, give me a second. I'm on my Harvey bingo sheet. Everyone is now twice. One more time, and I got a cross.
Ron's he's a friendly face in a streaming community.
I am blue to everyone.
You log into Eve, there's Ron's face. Ron.
That guy looks like he might help us. Let's talk to him. All right, reach out.
While it is true that the resources exist in the form of players and social connections, there are few of those. They are hard to find, and B, it's still less than the English-speaking community has. And I read, the localization is the thing that made us invite them in, the thing that made them start trying to play this game, and it's also only 1% of what they need.
I will say, on the very first day of the sort of this amazing Korean influx, I was looking through the corporation search pages, as I do, UX, right? And I found that in the search page, they didn't have a Korean selection in the drop-down. So I made note of that and sent it on, and they were like, "Oh yeah, good point."
Well,
so,
thanks. Go ahead.
Ways to find them, right?
Thanks to Ashtarothi, we have what happens when you deploy a structure, and in bright red letters it says this will be the first structure controlled by your corporation or alliance. Owning at least one structure makes a corporation or alliance eligible to declare formal wars and to have formal wars declared against them. I think that's actually badly written, but it is in red, so somebody is going to read it when they're putting down their structure. So there's the answer we were looking for, Ron. They do get a big warning. It's, I think it's not written very well, and I don't know how that translates to a different language either, but it sounds to me like it's written in a way that makes it sound like an advantage, not necessarily. The color red is an alert that makes it look like a disadvantage, but when you read it, it sounds like an advantage, because now I can declare wars and have wars.
I'm a CEO.
I would have to put on my
I'm a CEO and I
hat.
see red text, I'm looking it up if it's not clear.
I have to put on my work hat, Matterall, and I have to say, sort of, but I would want to see that in the localized client. Like, how is it translated? What does it look like in that client, which is what they used?
This is in the client, I think.
No, Korean
No, he wants
client.
to see it in Korean.
Oh, like what actually is a translation?
Yeah.
What did that
see?
guy see? Not what are we
use
seeing?
the same colors, surely. I mean,
It's probably red too, unless
hell.
unless you have to translate red to a different color in Korean.
even in English, that statement, sounds fairly benign. It doesn't say,
Yeah.
"Oh, by the way, you put this structure down, and
You're in danger.
Pirate are going to war deck you, and they're going to use they're going to use all kind of tactics that you've never even heard of.
What if
to totally dominate you for a while?
The word war in red is enough for me.
But
to
all
go
the
Googling.
all the words are in red. And what if red is the color of fortune back east?
Well,
now you're with me, brother.
Yeah,
now
like
you're
me
with
putting
me.
a sign on my front door saying you're eligibly shot.
We're gonna make a
Red
lot of
envelope
money
only
now.
means good things.
Yeah.
It's coming in a red envelope. It must be good.
What we need is a picture of Harvey down at the bottom, and then next to it, everything you own will be destroyed immediately! Exclamation point! Exclamation point!
Yeah. All right. This is why I love Fridays, and I love having Harvey around. He's so fun. And thank you guys for coming around. We got to go. I got to go. Otherwise, I'd let this thing run on and on and on and on and on. But
I got to go as well. See you, Matt. See you guys.
Bye. We're all getting called away. Life starts. But it was really nice spending some time with you guys in here in this channel, but also in chat. Thanks for spending some time with us. We'll get this up on the podcast as quickly as possible so people can listen to it. This is Friday Talking in Stations. This is also Today in EVE Online for December 6th, 2019. I want to say thanks to everybody that showed up. We're going to raid, and then we will continue this conversation offline at Talking in Stations Discord. Ron, do you have someone that we should raid? I'm looking at Marquis Dragons up.
Let me look here.
Inner Hell, I think that might be Russian though.
You know what?
Watch.
Joey Dowie.
Joey Dowie.
Joey Dowie number 9 is in Streamfleet.
Streamfleet.
Yeah,
we'll take
2
that.
viewers. Love it. Yeah.
We'll take that. We're about to bomb and raid. Well, I don't want to say the name because I might say it wrong.
I'll say it wrong. Yeah, it's fine. Let me trudge the way on this vernacular.
All right. Oh, 2 people. He's about to get bombed.
Yeah, buddy.
Hey, everybody, check out this new streamer. Jump on his stream and say hello to him. Maybe follow him. See how you do. Thank you guys for showing up today. We will see you on Monday. All right. Here's the raid. Bye-bye.
Should have raided the Koreans.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Got to join Streamfleet.